It should come as no surprise to you that I'm a kid of the 80s and the 90s, and that means I love Nintendo. Sure, some of my friends like Sega Genesis and Sonic, but I was a Mario and Nintendo fan, and I was also a Castlevania fan. I loved Castlevanias 1, 3, and while I was playing Super Castlevania 4, little did I know that Konami was actually making a game for the PC Engine called Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Now, this would end up being a very classic Castlevania game, and a turning point in the franchise, because after Rondo of Blood, Konami would actually make Symphony of the Night. But I didn't get to play Rondo of Blood. Instead, what I got to play was Castlevania Dracula X, the half-assed port of Rondo of Blood, and my god, is it hard. It's still a good game, and we're gonna play it until we win. Before we go on, I just have to say, Dracula X is not a bad game. It's actually a really good game. It's just not Rondo of Blood, one of Konami's crowning achievements. The problem with Dracula X is that if you consider it to be a SNES port of Rondo of Blood, then it's a terrible game. The graphics, sound, levels, and general gameplay are all subpar to its PC Engine counterpart. On the other hand, if you consider Dracula X to be its own game, unique from Rondo of Blood and exclusive to the Super Nintendo, then the game suddenly becomes much more interesting. For a SNES game, the graphics are pretty awesome. Not amazing, but very acceptable for the SNES. The controls are tight, just like every Castlevania fan would have it, and the sound is, well, hey, the background music of this video speaks for itself. Dracula X is also hard. Damn hard. Unlike Rondo of Blood, which is difficult but not ball-bustingly insane, Dracula X didn't feel like it got the good old Konami playtesting that every other Castlevania game would normally get. Instead, Dracula X feels like it was rushed. There are some sections of this game that are just downright brutal, some parts are impossible to get through without taking much damage, and the ending, well, we'll get to that later. There are a lot of reasons this game is hard. First off, if you got used to the way Super Castlevania 4 controlled, then you're boned. The controls here are stiff, and you can only attack with your whip in one direction, a lot like the old Castlevania games. You take a lot of damage when you get hit, and you do not get a lot of time to recover after being hit. Yes, you have enough health to survive long enough to get to the boss, and the post-hit invincibility is enough to keep you from getting killed by the same monster, but don't rely on it to get you through some tight spots, otherwise you're dead. Some parts of the game can be devastatingly difficult. There are some small hallways that are just littered with enemies you can't get past, and some enemies hit so hard that you'll be their bitch in a few seconds. The bosses can be pretty insane. Most of them have a gimmick you can take advantage of, but some of them are just outright platforming challenges. It may seem hopeless, but there are some things you can do to stay alive. Get used to the controls, and fast. If you've played Symphony of the Night or Super Castlevania 4, chances are you're gonna need some practice. They're very tight. Get used to how the whip works. If you've played the classic Castlevania, you should be okay, but if you played other Castlevania games, the whip mechanics are gonna annoy you. You can't whip in 8 directions, and the whip itself has a slight delay. Jumping is very rigid in this one. If you jump in one direction, you'd better be damn certain that's the direction you want to go in. You absolutely need to learn how the regular enemies can be beaten if you even hope to get past this one. Some of these enemies can just be downright devastating. Collect as many hearts as possible because you're gonna need to abuse the hell out of your sub-weapon to get past this one. On the other hand, you really shouldn't bother with any sub-weapon other than the axe. This thing is deadly in the right hands and will come in particular use against the final boss. But before we get there, we've got to get through the rest of the game. Now, there are multiple paths you can take, but there's really only 2 possible paths, and they don't diverge much. So instead of busting my ass trying to get one specific screen on video, I've decided to be lazy and just play through the game. And there's also prisoners to save, 2 of them to be specific. One of them is Maria, a pivotal character in SOTN. Of course, you don't need to save them because doing so doesn't actually change anything. Literally, if you save Maria, it doesn't matter in this game, so what's the point? Let the bitch die. The first level isn't anything special. Go to the right, kill everything in your way, don't fall down any pits. The second and third screens might annoy you though because they have bats and Medusa heads. The bats and heads are easy to take care of so long as you hit them before they hit you. The only problem is that they have a whacked out movement pattern, which makes hitting them with your whip a pain. There's one screen here that always gets some players. A giant bull will rush you and you'll be forced to jump over some pits to avoid getting killed. Don't bother trying to kill the monster bull, instead just outrun it. Getting hit by this thing is a death sentence, and killing it takes a lot of hits. So don't bother, and just run to the other side of the screen. On the next screen, you'll face off against the Black Panther boss, and this guy can be a pain if you don't know his pattern. He likes to jump out at you and shoot fireballs, both of which do a decent amount of damage. The easiest way to deal with this guy is to get in close when he's on the ground, whip him, and then move back slightly. After you hit him, he'll jump into the air and shoot a fireball. Move back a bit and then jump over the fireball, then keep moving. This will let the Panther jump over you without you taking any damage. Repeat this process until you've moved on to the next stage. The next part of the game sucks. You need to expertly move through the stage in order to avoid the crumbling platforms. It's hard to be sure, but it's very doable if you can time your jumps correctly. And you'll need perfect timing because there are a bunch of fishmen that pop out of the water below. It's difficult, but with enough practice, you can master it. The next few sections aren't that tough, just run straight through until you get up the stairs. The stairs, on the other hand, can be a bit of a pain in the ass. You see, getting past the Axe Lord is no big deal, but it's the hallway with the spearmen that can cause you nightmares. This is one of those sections that didn't get play-tested enough. It's just downright unfair. You've not only got spearmen in your path, but above you as well, and they can stab down, making your life all the more miserable. There's one way, and this is the only way, to get through this section unscathed. You have to be very aggressive, but you have to be careful not to get too far into their attack zone. Essentially, you need pixel-perfect precision. Too close in, and you'll get nailed by their slash attack. Too far away, and you can't hit them. You need to be in that sweet spot to attack them as often as possible. Then, when the spearmen raise their spears in the air, jump away from them. This should give you enough time to not get nailed by their powerful attacks while you're able to attack them. Time it correctly, and they'll never get off a slash attack. Keep this pattern up until you can get to the next screen, which is easy enough to get through. Just don't forget to grab the ham before you get up to the boss, who is a very large bat. This guy is kind of difficult, if only because he can be a bit erratic. Once you hit him in his large form, he'll break up into smaller bats that follow a simple pattern. Just don't be in the way of these smaller bats and wail away at them with your whip, and you should be alright. The next few sections aren't anything special. While the platforming might look intimidating, it's really not that bad. Just make sure to take care of the Medusa heads and avoid jumping directly into the moving spikes. You should be alright. The next screen is a mite bit harder because it's yet another room filled to the brim with spearmen. If you manage to get past the original spearman spam, you should be able to make it past this one. Just take your time. After that, you'll get this game's version of the water passage. It's not as difficult as the original one. In fact, it's embarrassingly easy. Yeah, you'll get a watch to stop time, but you really won't need it because all you have to worry about is not jumping into the water. Then there's a short room with an Axe Lord or two, at which point you'll be forced to jump across several pillars and kill off a wall of skulls. At which point you'll promptly fall down a pit and be forced to go through the underground caves. And yes, this is where the diverging paths come in. You could make your way through the pillar section and get to a different part of the game, but 99% of you out there will end up in the underground caves. And they're a pain in the ass. Actually, it's not the whole level that's the problem, it's the final section and the boss that will make you hate life. There's a large skeleton and dragon skeleton you have to battle your way through. They're not super tough, just annoying. And another section where you have to jump through mud while avoiding jumping too high because you'll nail your head on spikes. It's not tough, but these two sections do drain your life. So that's a problem, because you're about to face one mean motherfucker of a boss. This is the Shaft lookalike, although it's not Shaft, it's just some really horrible clone. This guy has two forms, and he's a pain in the ass. In his first form, he has two attacks, a fireball that curses you, and he spawns skeletons. This might not seem hard at first, but you'll quickly learn that being cursed by that fireball is a death sentence. What makes this fireball suck? First off, it splits into 2 fireballs, both of which can split into more fireballs. Getting hit by any one of these fireballs will curse you. What happens when you're cursed? You're slowed down significantly, and you can't jump as high as you normally would. Oh, and being cursed is the worst, because this shaft wannabe bastard starts spawning skeletons, and these guys hurt. Being cursed plus skeletons equals death, so don't get cursed. Your best bet for beating his first form is to be as aggressive as possible, because hitting the boss will send him flying across the screen. This keeps you alive because it delays his fireballs, and less fireballs on screen makes a happy Richter. His next form is badass. He'll spawn tombstones that spin around him, and they hurt like hell. Oh, and he spawns a ton of mudmen. You've only got one option when facing this guy. Beat the living shit out of him before he beats the shit out of you. This is a war of attrition. Use all of your hearts and beat him to death with your whip. It doesn't matter. Take this second form down as quickly as you can. After that pain in the ass, you'll go through one of the more challenging sections of the game, trying to get past the Freemen. This part is unbelievably ridiculous. Then again, if you've ever played Castlevania, you know anything involving the Freemen is gonna be a pain in the butt. These buggers are killed the same way they always are, by killing them before they hit the ground. The next section is filled with crumbling blocks and ravens. I don't know why I had such a hard time with this part, because it looks easy, but it's so devilishly evil. In theory, what you need to do is leap back and forth between breaking floors, and then kill the ravens that spawn so you don't get knocked back. In practice, however, it ends up being a race to the top. It's not an easy race because the breaking platforms and the ravens are a pain in the ass, but it's doable with enough effort. After that, you'll have to get through another couple of rooms loaded with spearmen. The same strategy applies here as it usually does. The only other problem you'll run into are the swordmen. They'll stab at you, making life miserable. Whatever you do, don't let up with these guys. Just keep whipping the hell out of them until they fall. There's a little secret here that you can take advantage of. There's a piece of ham you can eat. Walk up the stairs to the next screen, then walk back down and eat the ham again. Yeah, it's cheap, but the whole game is cheap, so why not? And after that, more spearmen, and then a room with nothing but platforms atop an instant death pit. This part isn't hard, unless you're in a hurry, and you shouldn't be in a hurry because there's no time limit. If you just walk up to a ledge and try to kill the enemies from across the pit, you'll be fine. It's time consuming, but don't worry about it. Once you get past this section, you'll face one bastard of a boss, the Wolfman. Getting past this guy can be tough at first, because he has several different attacks that can really screw you up. The first thing he does is to launch a couple of fireballs at you. These are easily avoided if you duck. Another attack he'll do is climb up the side of the wall and bound forward with a power attack. It's tough avoiding this one because he'll come right at you. All you need to do is wait until he leaves, then move towards him to avoid the attack. He's got a sliding kick attack that's easy to avoid because he'll stay kneeling down for a second before he launches himself forward. There's also another wall launching attack he'll do when he leaps to the top of the screen. This one is easier to avoid than the side wall fling because it's much slower, but you have to move away from the attack, not towards it. Another attack is one where he'll punch at you. His third punch will be a super punch. Both attacks are easily avoided, but his third attack will send him flying at you in the air. You'll have to duck down or move away to avoid it. Once you've beaten him, he'll get in one more attack, a super move that causes a massive explosion around him. Avoid this at all costs because it hurts like hell. The next stage is straightforward. Climb up some stairs. Not a big deal. There's really only one section that's a problem, and that's because it's an Axeman on a ledge, but it's nothing tough. After that, though, you'll be forced to go through a strange climbing stage with floating blocks. This might seem hard, but it's not worth going through it unless you need the hidden ham at the end of the stage. If you want to, just do what I do and just skip it. Simply jump up on the floating bricks and you'll make your way up. The next part is the clock tower. Oh, the clock tower. How I hate thee. There are some things in life that are absolute truths. Mega Man will always be the blue bomber, Mario will always wear a red hat and have a mustache, and Castlevania's clock tower is a son of a bitch to get through. The same holds true in Dracula X, and this is another stage that just wasn't play-tested enough. because god damn it, it's next to impossible. Sure, there are some Medusa heads here. They're really not the problem. No, it's the fucking spearmen that will cock-block you from getting up this tower. The problem here is that you need to climb up the stairs to get to the next platform. The next platform is blocked by a spearman. The spearman is invulnerable to everything except holy water and your whip. You can't jump up and fire holy water. You can't jump up and attack the spearman with your whip. In other words, you're fucked. How do you get past this part? Well, I just don't know. The truth is that you're probably better off abusing your invulnerability while on a step to climb up. You'll take a lot of damage though. The next part of the clock tower involves side-scrolling platforming and isn't nearly as difficult as the last section. Thank God too, because it has the potential to be a pain in the ass. Once you reach the top of the clock tower, you'll have to face off against this bitch that flies around on a magic skull. Her only attack involves sending the eyes of the skull out to do various magical things. The first attack is some kind of magical barrier around the eyes, which will try and hunt you down. The second attack is a lightning bolt style of attack, which is damn annoying. The third attack turns the eyes into fireballs, which is only slightly more annoying than the first attack. This boss isn't that difficult, save for the lightning attack. Avoiding the eyes is easy, but those lightning bolts, damn. Your best bet for avoiding the attack is to be in the center between both eyes. If you're outside either eye, you'll probably get hit, and if you're on the edge of the clock tower, you'll be knocked off. While you're avoiding the eyes, you have to continually hit the skull. Either whip it or use your daggers, or axe if you're pro. Just be aggressive and the boss should go down easily. After the skull bitch bites the dust, you'll make your way through the final stage. And it's not that hard. Up until you get to the floating platforms. Holy hell, these two rooms are nightmares. The real problem here is the second room. You're stuck on moving platforms trying to kill an Axeman while Medusa heads are flying at you. If you get knocked off the platform, you'll be forced to get through the rooms again, which means all of the enemies have respawned, which means you'll be forced to kill the Axeman while avoiding the Medusa heads, which means you're going to fall off. Believe me, you're going to die. A lot. If you manage to get past this part, you'll face off against Dracula. Unlike the boss fight in Rondo of Blood, which is the same boss fight you play in the opening of Symphony of the Night, this fight is just crazy fucking hard. Look at this shit. You've got a bunch of pits, Dracula spawning at random locations, and he shoots fireballs at you. If you get hit, you're basically dead, because you're gonna fall down the pit. This is a motherfucker of a fight, if you don't know what to do. And believe me, once you learn how to beat this guy, you will shit yourself in anger. Check this out. In this hallway leading up to the badass, grab the axe, then, inside his chamber, simply stand on the middle platform and wait for Dracula to spawn. When he does, fire your axe at him and avoid his fireballs. You can literally stand in the same spot this entire fight, and he will barely lay a hand on you. After you knock him down a bit in health, he'll transform into his badass form, which is significantly different from the Rondo of Blood version. He's like a flying Satan or something like that. There's no real easy way to take him out in his second form. If you have enough life left, you can simply do what I do and bum rush him with everything you've got. His second form fireballs can be whipped out of existence, and he's a bit more vulnerable to your whip. If he corners you in this form, or you feel you're running out of space, simply jump through him. You'll take some damage, but if you were flawless on the first form, you should have more than enough health left to take a couple of hits from his second form. Keep wailing away at him, and eventually... When I was a kid, I didn't get the ending. I didn't get the ending at all. But now that I'm an adult and I understood that this was actually some sort of weird hybrid port sequel of Rondo of Blood, I sort of understand where the ending's coming from. it still doesn't excuse it from being a horrible ending. On the bright side, though, it's Castlevania, and you don't really need a story for that. You're one of the Belmonts, you've got a whip, and you've just kicked Dracula's ass. Congratulations, the end. You know, I'm actually getting tired of platformers, though, because they tend to have stories that are rather weak, and, well, I'd like a story with a bit more substance. You know what? What if we tackled, say, an RPG next time?